right, my love? No money, okay? Yes, you did it. Very good boy. Nice day, Raja.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow. Between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky, the larks still bravely singing fly. Scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow. Loved, and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye go pace with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Saskatchewan remembers Sergeant Prescott Shipway, 36, Saskatoon.
Courage, honor, and sacrifice. I'm David Curtin. On November 11th, we honor the memory of those who fought and died in the name of freedom. Students, farmers, fathers, brothers, sons, and daughters, called to places they could never find on a map. Passionate, Vimy Ridge, Caen, Normandy. More than 1.5 million Canadians served in the 2 world wars in Korea. Some 110,000 made the ultimate sacrifice. From the sea to the sky, trenches and battlefields, Canada's war effort is widely regarded as remarkable. The Great War, World War II, Korea, Afghanistan, and in peacekeeping missions around the globe. As we reflect on this Remembrance Day, Newstalk Radio takes this time to share the stories of those who served with courage, honor, and sacrifice, lest we forget. Although it has been close to a half a century for many Saskatchewan veterans who served in the Second World War, the memories are as fresh as if it happened yesterday. Newstalk Radio's Trump James speaks to 2 Saskatoon men who served in World War II.
In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row.
It's a poem 92-year-old Rennie Anderson says he knows so well. When he was 20, he joined the Air Force as a wireless and radar operator. He crossed the Atlantic with 12,000 troops on the Queen Mary.
We slept on the deck in our greatcoats, our big coats, and had our gas masks as our pillow.
In England, he joined a 7-man crew in charge of a 4-engine Halifax plane. It strikes him now how young they all were.
The engineer was from England, and he was the old guy. He was 26 years old, and we all called him Grant.
Anderson gently flipped through his logbook with yellowing pages and neat printing showing every trim. He completed 32 missions. many bombing German oil refineries. During one mission, a 2,000-pound bomb was released, and they had to return to their base with the bomb on board.
Just as we were going to land, I looked over at my pilot, and he had his fingers in his ears. So it shook me for a second, you know. I thought, well, if it goes, we're never going to see anything anyway. We'll just see bits and pieces.
The bomb dropped out on the runway, but did slow. It exploded in a gravel pit hours later, and that wasn't his only close call. Anderson remembers quickly warning his crew about a German fighter plane closing in.
My pilot says, you know, I think if you hadn't have called them on that one, we wouldn't have been here.
After he completed his tour, Anderson received a special pin and a treat he hasn't forgotten.
You get 2 fried eggs. And in England, that's unheard of. That's only for the Queen.
He was part of the 408 Goose Squadron, which still flies today as helicopter pilots in Afghanistan. Josh Story unbuttons the cuff of his sleeve, showing a permanently swollen wrist hit by shrapnel.
And then I got that. 33 inches of the radius blown out. And that was it.
Now 91, he remembers joining the Army so many years ago.
16 years old, I said I was 18.
He was sent to Italy, where the memories of fighting, like his injuries, are just below the surface.
Well, I had trouble pulling the trigger, and I had a German or Italian soldier in my sights. I had a terrible time to pull the trigger, but those times I had to, or else I would have been the one.
Story still wonders how he made it back.
The Lord had a different life for me. I don't know. Yes, just lied and just killed.
Trell Kaloje, Newstalk Radio, Saskatchewan.
For the first time in Canadian history, a Navy veteran read the Act of Remembrance poem in Mitcham at the National Remembrance Day ceremony in Ottawa. Saskatchewan veteran Alex Maurice is in Ottawa to represent Navy veterans' contributions to the Canadian military.
My name is Alex Maurice and I'm from Beauvoir. When I needed to make a choice, either to try and join the RCMP or the military, because I knew there was not so much economic development or employment up in northern Saskatchewan, so I ended up in the military. And I joined in signed my documents in Saskatoon in December of 1973. You come across prejudice just like you do in Civilian Street. But you learn to ignore people like that and you educate them.
Want to die.
Bullets are colorblind and you learn to value each other in terms of as human beings, and you learn to cover each other's mouths, and that's what I learned and valued about the military is no matter where you are, peacekeeping or you're on exercise, winter, summer, fall, and you have a 3-man detachment and everything you have is in a sleigh. You learn to get along as a 3-member detachment when you're in the mountains and you're going for 10 days at a time. You know, you're like a donkey, you're from the front of the sleigh to the harness to the back, and everyone pulls their weight, and you go out there and you survive in the bush for 10 days, and you learn to accept each other for your little differences, but you also learn to respect a person for their personality when you want to be alone. You learn about human behavior, and you respect life. And you learn to live with it, and you carry to this, I carry to this. And when I was born, I wanted to raise a family, so I got out and got into public service. It was the best years of my life. It taught me discipline, teamwork, leadership skills. I was also given the honor to be the first Navy veteran in Canadian history. I've been invited by the Royal Canadian Legion to say the Act of Remembrance in my language, which is Mitcham. It'll be a year I'll always remember, yeah.
Some 75 years ago, a generation of men and many women went to war to fight for freedom against the Nazi regime. On Remembrance Day, the faces of veterans in their 90s silently reflect that memory. They gave up their youth, but watched as so many others give up their lives. The small number of veterans to our left are telling their stories to leave a record for a younger generation before their voices fade away like the black and white photos of wartime.
A generation enrolled in the greatest...
When Reg Harrison left his family's farm for the Air Force in 1941, it suddenly struck him that he was named after two uncles who died in the First World War. He served in 41 Squadron Bomber Command, a dangerous post as he learned on his first mission when a live 500-pound bomb went off inside the plane.
Most of the blast went back, cut the aircraft in half. That's why two gunners lost their lives. The rest of us were literally blown out of the aircraft.
On his 13th flight, he crashed on takeoff when one engine went out at night.
So when the engine quit, you veer off the runway because you got no power on that side. So I was heading for the other aircraft. Can't see anything. So you got to make a split decision. If I throttle back, can I stop in time? If not, I'll plow into them also. I shoved the throttle through the gate. I got enough power to lift the aircraft off, and then it stalled, and we crashed into a stone wall around the farm off the building. And my bomb was killed there. I don't remember the crash. I was knocked out. They found me on the wing.
His luck would hold out again on his 17th mission.
Came back to base, and I was the only aircraft in the 6th group that came back. So we were short of fuel. We had no alternative but to bail out.
Harrison still remembers the darkness and the rain. He says that was the most frightening part. Getting back to base that time, he was given a choice.
Crew's not fit to fly anymore. Their nerves were shattered, or whatever the term they use. But you can still fly your rear gunner, but if you also want to go back to Canada, we'll give you credit for a turn.
So he talked to his gunner.
If the rest of the boys of the squadron know we're still fit to fly, if we don't fly, they'll think we're cowards. I got another crew. We only did 2 trips and we got shot up over Duisburg, lost all the hydraulics, came back to base.
Said he wasn't going up again.
Well, crash, you've survived 4 of them. I got the feeling you're not going to survive the next one, so we're going to screen you. So that was the end of my flight.
Harrison understands why many veterans won't speak about their experiences in war. His father never told him about World War I, but he wants to tell his story to provide a record.
There's no glory in war. And some people say, why do countries go to war? Well, sometimes it's necessary to go to war.
He says it's important to teach a new generation why they went to war and what it was like, so they can remember those who gave their lives for freedom. Adriana Christensen, Newstalk Radio, Regina.
As we reflect on this Remembrance Day, Newstalk Radio takes this time to share the stories of those who served with courage, honor, and sacrifice.
One young soldier has stayed with me for years.
We're looking at the wounded. We had quite a few that were up in Holland at the time, and all these troops. But this young boy came in, he was wounded. So I kind of tucked him under my wing. I was going to kid myself. So when we're ready to come on the aircraft, I said, God would look after you. And he says, I don't think so. My mom will do a better job. And that I will stay with you. Mom will do a better job.
Filled with emotion, he pauses for a moment. He lived through that war, came home, went back to school, and had a family. But on the 11th, he remembers all those who didn't get back to him, including the generations who've come after and gone to war again.
But not able to come back, have a family, something old. Be thankful for that you're here. You know, and that they can enjoy this freedom. They get up every morning, do what you want to do.
On November 11th, veterans like Steve straighten up to a military salute, seeing second nature after 70 years out of service. Those who cannot mount come slowly in wheelchairs or walkers, but they didn't miss it, because they will always remember, and their hopefully will too, is the answer to the Newstalk Radio Regina.
One First Nations veteran's story of serving in Germany at the height of the Cold War shows there is nothing easy about being a
Ray Sanderson was raised on the James Smith Cree First Nation in Prince Albert. His grandfather, uncle, and brother all served in the military, and eventually it was his turn.
I enlisted in March of 1961. Yeah. I went into a regiment called the Black Watch, Canada. I got my basic training in 10 days from New Brunswick.
And it wasn't long before Sanderson shipped out.
I was 17 years old, now I'm 10, and about 10 months later I was overseas. I was in West Germany, so I had to go up pretty fast there.
He arrived the year that construction started on the Berlin Wall, guarding the NATO side of the line.
We were training all the time, getting ready, just in case something happens, and the Russians are doing the same thing on the other side.
Often he was looking across at kids the same age he was.
It was a very unique situation, actually. After we used to wave at each other, you know.
Then in 1962, things got a lot more tense.
Heralding the policy of this nation to regard any nuclear missile launched from Cuba against any nation in the Western Hemisphere as an attack by the Soviet Union on the United States.
Sanderson says the Cuban Missile Crisis put everyone on edge.
We were dug in, ready to go. The Russians were doing the same thing on the other side. We were looking at each other and ready to go. Boy, it was scary in a way. We were 15 minutes away from the Third World War.
He remembers his sergeant at the time didn't do much to help calm him down.
I remember him walking behind my trench and he said, "We thought we'd get a strike anyway." And I was wondering what he meant by strike. Then he hit me. He talked about a nuclear strike.
He says he can still remember being terrified that a Russian missile could be coming to turn him into dust.
The first thing that entered my mind was, what am I doing here? I should be fishing at home and scratching over my buddies. They're probably fishing and swimming and what am I doing here, you know?
That was Sanderson's scariest 13 days in uniform. But he says his 12-year military career left him with a lot more.
The friends I got, I still got them today, and right across Canada. It's really something, you know?
These days, Sanderson has devoted himself to working with the FSIN on behalf of other First Nations veterans. Among his biggest causes, getting proper headstones for hundreds of graves.
In Saskatchewan November, over 200 graves to be marked yet. First Nations veterans on reserves.
Even though he says there's still work to do to right past wrong, he's got a simple request for Remembrance Day.
When you see a veteran, shake their hand, you know. You're enjoying freedom today. Like, you know, we're very lucky to live in Canada.
For Newstalk Radio, Saskatoon.
This year marks the 100th anniversary of the outbreak of World War I. Canada pledged the troops to fight for Britain in August, and in the months that followed, thousands of Canadians rallied to fight. 6,439 of them from Saskatchewan died in what they believed to be the war to end all wars. Those who survived have passed away, but their stories live on in a record of war letters passed down through generations. In honor of Remembrance Day this year, Newstalk Radio's Adriana Christensen brings you Saskatchewan in World War I, letters from the front.
Dear Pa, the Huns used the liquid fire while bombing us out of the support trench. I didn't know what it was at first. Thought it was some kind of incendiary bomb that set everything burning that the pieces touched.
A letter from James Stevenson Balfour of Regina describes a small part of the hell he saw from the front lines in World War I.
The sky certainly became dulled by the smoke from the explosion of shells, and the smell is sickening.
He was from one of the most prominent families in Regina and enlisted with 4 friends from university.
I sometimes think we're doing the only and right thing. In that case, we couldn't be doing anything better with our lives.
When they first arrived in France in 1915, they were young men looking for adventure.
So far, we have had a pretty good time, and the experience one gets seems to me to be worth the chances you run.
A century later, Patricia Balfour remembers the man she knew as Grandpa, or Jim Jim.
I think about him in those damn trenches with the mustard gas and the chlorine gas and the constant bombardment.
Reading through the letters saved for generations, she's amazed at how he kept his tone cheerful.
Don't worry about me. Our chances to come out wounded or untouched are much greater than the chances to fall.
At least in the beginning, until his friends began to die.
It's still brave and courageous, but you start sensing the despair.
He was wrong about their chances, writing from a hospital bed after being hit by shrapnel. He describes fighting side by side and how his friends Wilson and Beck Turner were shot in the same battle.
The second day in the trenches, about 8:30 a.m., the Germans started bombarding and kept it up till 1:30 p.m. Then made an attack coming over in bunches. The bombardment was a terrible one, and many were killed and wounded around me. I won't tell you the terrible feeling when I recognized the fellows as we passed along the trench. Poor fellows, they died like heroes, everyone. They were game till the last.
James was the only one of his group of friends to come home. Balfour believed this was a war to end all wars.
I never dreamt that we'd be taking part in the greatest war the world has seen. I thought, and thankfully, that war was of the past, and young men would not be called from their homes to take part in a struggle like this. I hope there will be 100 years of peace, and that the next 3 or 4 generations will not have to take part in any war.
Balfour's son Craig would enlist and fight in World War II. Adriana Christensen, Newstalk Radio, Regina.
Courage, honor, and sacrifice. As we reflect on this day, November 11th, we have been bringing you just a few of the countless stories from the fading voices of those who fought in the wars and missions Canada has participated in. This has been Saskatchewan Remembrance on Newstalk Radio.
Saskatchewan remembers those who fought at Vimy Ridge. In the heart of canola country, at the Invigor Breeding Center of Excellence, our team of experts identify and develop new trait technologies. Every year, thousands of potential hybrids are rigorously tested to see if they can measure up to Invigor's high standards, with very few succeeding. Why? Because we want you to be as proud of your Invigor as we are. Visit your retailer or invigorresults.ca to find the perfect Invigor for your farm.
This is Newstalk Radio.
John Gormley Live, brought to you this half hour by Bobcat of Regina.
Newstalk 980 CJME. You can't add more hours to your day, but you can subtract.
AgriMission.com. And that's the Delari BMW community file.
Passionate, opinionated, right. John Gormley, live.
Where Saskatchewan comes to talk.
Newstalk 980 CJME.
Richard Brown in for John Gormley on this Remembrance Day, 2011. I was fortunate to interview the last surviving veteran of World War I, Canadian, by the name of John Babcock. When I interviewed him, he was 104, and living in Spokane, Washington, with his much younger wife. Dorothy was, I think she was in her late 70s, much younger. And we sat in his living room, and he told me stories of what it was like for him. Now, John did not see any action in World War I. He first enlisted when he was 15 on the East Coast. They wouldn't take him. He lied. They figured it out. He came back 2 years later when he was 17 and enlisted, and they finally did send him overseas, and he was training in Britain to cross the Channel and go to France when the war ended. So technically he was a veteran, but he never saw action. But so many thousands of Canadians did. One of them was a fellow by the name of George Blackjack Vowell. He was a farmer from Peace River. His granddaughter is a journalist. Her name is Jackie Larson. She works for QMI back east. And she found his journal and then edited it. And I want to share with you some of the entries from Blackjack Vowell's journal about his battles through 1915 and on. And by April of 1915, Blackjack was in the thick of the second battle of Ypres. The front, he says, was just the place for the person that likes thrills. The noise made by high explosive makes the hair stand, and then along comes the flying steel and fragments slithering through the air, making the most horrible sounds imaginable, which makes a cold chill run up and down the spine. Puts a sinking sensation in the pit of my stomach, and the brain starts urging the feet to beat it, and the feet refuse to act, and the knees get wobbly. His nerves break, he goes buggy. I've seen several cases of it. It isn't a pleasant sight to see. One entry from Corporal George Blackjack Vowell. His battalion was quickly decimated. Another entry. Words cannot describe the scenes we went through in Ypres, and I have often wondered since how so many of us ever got through alive. The battalion was fighting for 6 days. We went 4 days without anything to eat, and some of the boys never had any sleep during the 6 days and nights. We will win out in time, but at what cost? Some of the journal accounts are I guess you'd call it a succinct blur. Raid on German trenches failed. Germans waiting for us. 6 killed. A dozen wounded. Sandy Clark was killed today. Shot through the head by a sniper. The Germans sent over 10,000 shells in an hour and a half. So damn homesick I can hardly do any work just waiting for the next lead. 22 kilometers march. We made it in less than 4 hours. One of the hardest marches I ever done. There are thousands of soldiers' carcasses lying up there yet. Another entry. The bullets were ripping the dirt up all around me for a bit, but none of them was marked with Black Jack, he wrote from Flanders Fields on New Year's Day, 1916. They've started strafing again. So if my spelling is bad, don't blame me. I'm doubled up in one corner of the dugout trying to make myself as small as possible and not making very much success of it. The beggars don't care where they throw the damn shells anyway. They're liable to hurt someone yet. I'm supposed to be an artist at swearing, but I choke up whenever I start in on the devils. And how tough was life for Blackjack? He walked 4 miles for a bath. Carried a wounded buddy for 1.5 miles to an outpost medic. Holidays, little fanfare. Here's another picture. I guess we'll be in the ditches on Christmas Day. Some prospect to look forward to. Christmas Day dawned foggy, wet, muddy, just like many of the winter days in Flanders. With the occasional bark of a gun breaking in on our festivities to remind us that everything was not as it should be. We had a pretty lively day of it. Last year, I spent Christmas on the plains. 2 years ago, I was working in a coal mine. 3 years ago, I was working on a ranch. 4 years ago, 2 boys and myself rode 60 miles to dance. We got snowed in and stayed a week. Another entry. I was on guard last night when the new year made her appearance, and say, talk about fireworks. I think I saw about the grandest display that I ever let loose at once. And then, of course, the loss of buddies. Just some of the entries. From George Blackjack Bowell, farmer from East River, Alberta, who fought and survived World War I. Your call's coming up. I'm Richard Brown in for John Gormley. This is Newstalk Radio.
Regina's #1 news and information station. Newstalk 980 CJME.
Talaga yung bakal din yun. Nag-sale din yung parehong presyo yung mga packet nila. 6 malalak yung packet.
Saan dito? Nag-sale?
Sa London Drugs mo. Ang original price is 9 isang packet, higing 7. Kasi sandali lang mauubos yun.
Those who gave, and those who gave the ultimate. Right. Because business does go on. You know, doors are open. Some people are at work, some are not. Some are gathering right now for Remembrance Day services and ceremonies in their community. The Brand Center in Regina. But it is fine to make this day. Do you think Remembrance Day should be a statutory holiday, or should we continue the way we are? 877-332-8255. What's your feelings, your thoughts, your memories on this Remembrance Day? It's interesting that the Royal Canadian Legion isn't in favor of the idea of making Remembrance Day a statutory holiday. Spokesperson for the Royal Canadian Legion fellow by the name of Robert Scott says his organization favors the status quo, which gives each province's veterans the choice. And of course, every province is a little bit different. Nova Scotia is one of a handful of provinces that recognizes today as a holiday. But in honoring our veterans, it's also an education process for those who are in high school and grade school. I can remember when I was very young, long time ago. My dad used to take me to the armory in PA, and we would go to the Remembrance Day ceremonies at the armory. And then as time passed, Dad stopped going, and we stopped going. But he would always, I remember him sitting in his chair, watching the ceremonies from the National War Memorial in Ottawa. And so he may have stopped going, but he never stopped honoring those he fought with. And although we never talked about it much, because that's one of the things he never talked about, he was wounded in action and ended up losing a leg because of it. But it was never really part of who we were as a family. Except on those times, perhaps, when we stopped in another community and he'd want to spend a little bit of time with an old war buddy of his. And that usually meant there was going to be a couple of pops involved. And there always was. And so that usually meant the mom ended up having a, which was it, you know. So there were those moments. But I never really did find out exactly how he lost his leg until after he died in October of 2009. His lone surviving sibling is my aunt, his sister. And as we were remembering Dad, she says, I have a story to tell. And then she went on to tell the story of how he lost his leg and how in 1944 they were in a field in Holland. And his squad was going through this field. I think it was a turnip patch, actually. And along the side were German gunners with heavy caliber machine guns. And they would just strafe the field. They had the gun set low. And one of those bullets hit him below the shin, shattered his leg. And he obviously went down. The rest of the squad kept moving. And it wasn't until they got into the safety of some trees, some brush, that the lieutenant says, where's Brown? And some of the guys were saying, well, I think he's back there. And the lieutenant says, let's go get him. So off they did. Strafing this area, shooting at where they thought the Germans were, managed to create enough cover so that a couple of guys could get in and pull my dad to safety. But by that time, of course, with the lower leg shattered and a lot of blood lost, everybody kind of knew what the outcome was going to be. And so there was a field amputation below the knee. But given what the medical conditions were like at the time, gangrene set in. And so there was another amputation, this one above the knee. And then they shipped him back to England. But even then, it wasn't quite right. And there was another amputation, this one mid-thigh. And then he returned to Canada, recuperated. Fell in love with a young girl from southern Manitoba. She'd actually been working in a factory in Winnipeg during the war, making guns, rifles. And they got married, had a couple of kids, and went on to be a reasonably successful businessman, and led a life that really was entirely different than what he had been through in those days and weeks. And although it changed his life, he never really talked about it. It was never really, although it was part of who he was, it was never part of who he became. And so there, on November 11th, as a young boy, I'd go with my dad to the armory in PA to honor those who didn't come back. His friends, men, women he didn't even know. We'll take your calls, your memories of Remembrance Day, your thoughts on the importance of this day. Coming up at 877-332-8255. I'm Richard Brown in for John Gormley. This is News Talk Radio.
John Gormley Live, brought to you this half hour by CAA Travel.
News Talk 980 CJME.